Now, if you use an editing service, I hope that you're using an editing service that provides you with a certificate of editing. Like, okay, so there are lots of editing services around the world. Of course, like there's hundreds of choices that you have, but the established reputable companies, indeed any company like worth its like reputation, should be able to provide you with a certificate that the paper was edited by a native speaker, by an expert editor, by somebody with experience in that subject area, so that when you make the submission to the journal, you can put a line in the covering letter that says, you know, this paper was edited by, you know, this company, and here's the certificate attached to the covering letter, so that you don't get back a comment from one of the reviewers that says the English needs to be worked on, you know? And that's a key part of reviewer bias. Reviewers, humans, like this is human nature. Unfortunately, like, you know, you submit a paper to an international journal, chances are it's going to get reviewed by a native speaker. Chances are it's going to get reviewed by a male native speaker, actually, which introduces a whole additional layer of bias. And people do look at institutions, countries of origin, and they assume, you know, I experienced this myself when I moved from the UK, from Ireland actually to the UK. First of all, I found my papers were getting more easily accepted in international journals. Very interesting effect. Then I moved to Hungary, big drop in my submission acceptance rates, because people see Hungary, they think not so great as a place for doing research for whatever reason. So, but it's true. And I just finished doing a lot of workshops with colleagues in Egypt, you know, and this is very common amongst Egyptian researchers. They often feel that like, my English is perfect. You know, I've got all these qualifications in English, yet, you know, this university on my papers, it's having a bad effect on the peer review process. So for this reason, double-blind peer review may be a better option in many cases. Great question.
There are two other comments, one from Dimitri again, and he says that many journals no longer consider reviewers suggested by the authors due to fraud. And then another comment from Salt Baloch, he said proper editorial process, ignore self-recommended reviewers. They know their field and find experts. So the editorial. Yeah. If an editor cannot do that, it should not be editing on that field.
Yeah, I mean that's a fair comment. Unfortunately, though, like editors often aren't subject area specialists in particular fields, and they rely on author suggestions and they rely on search engines. I mean, we use when we're handling like a volume of papers, and our journal, it's, I don't know, it has an impact factor between 2 and 3, but we get like, you know, maybe 15 papers per week submitted, like across the whole of paleontology, paleobiology. And, you know, we use like these submission systems have inbuilt search engines. So you can go and you can search for keywords and brings up suggestions for reviewers. But I mean, like it or not, like the cover letter suggestions that authors make are looked at by editors. Like we check that these are real individuals, you know, we check that these are actual researchers, and you wouldn't use all of the suggestions that an author makes, but you would potentially use 1 or 2 out of a set of 5 or 6 peer reviewers potentially. So, you know, it's an important step to take as an author to increase your chances of success. Like it's an opportunity for you in the cover letter to make some suggestions for colleagues who would be in a position to review your paper. So don't send a cover letter that doesn't have those suggestions in it. Give the editor the opportunity to ignore those suggestions. They may use one of those suggestions, in which case you've, you know, enhanced your chances of success, which is what this is all about after all. You know, getting your papers published quick as possible in the best journals possible. So that's what our training is aimed at helping colleagues from around the world to do.
There's another comment from Gonzalo Ferreira. Is from the point of view of a reviewer, but also I think it's important for the authors. He says, as a reviewer, can you ask the original files from experiments in which a figure was done, experimental results? Some journals are doing this more and more often.
100%. Yes. As a reviewer, you're able to communicate with the editor. And if you feel that there's more information that you need to make an assessment of a paper, you should absolutely ask for it. And indeed, this may very well be a comment that you would want to make in your review. Like, why isn't the original data available? Because it's not just going to be you, the reviewer, that wants to see that. It's going to be other colleagues reading the paper in the future. So, I would say that data should be available anyway, probably in a supplement or in some kind of repository where other colleagues can get access to it. So yes, write to the editor. You can ask for anything you like as a peer reviewer that will help you with your assessment. Maybe other articles that the author has listed in the reference list that you can't get access to is another big one. Like the author should have those references. They've cited them in the reference list. So you as a reviewer, if you can't find them, you can ask for them. You go through the editor and you get that information back from the submitting author. So it's a great question. Great question.
Okay, and Andres Moreira is making a comment. Sorry, Franz. He said, "Dear Gareth, nice presentation. Since you are a paleontologist, please give us tips on how to avoid predatory journals."
Great, yeah. Okay, brilliant. So what is a predatory journal? Let's start from that perspective. A predatory journal, thanks to open access, thanks to the charging of these article processing charges, a predatory journal, by definition then, is a journal that is not interested in proper peer review. It's not interested in going through the accepted processes that we expect from journals. They just want to take your money. And so they'll publish your paper once they've charged you for that process. How can you avoid them? Well, there are a number of great databases to have a look at. Look in Scopus, look in the ISI database, look in websites like thinkchecksubmit.org. Have a look there at journals in your subject area that other colleagues around the world are using for their papers to avoid the potential predatory ones. I mean, that's a good starting point, of course. Have a look at the journal once you've selected a journal. Have a look at its website. Have a look at the editorial board. Are these people that you've heard of? You can even write a few emails to the members of the editorial board yourself and see if they reply, because that's a good way to spot if often predatory journals have just made up like an editorial board. So a very big issue in publishing, but put a bit of time into your journal selection. That's in particular important for your career, of course, like where you publish. Franz, do you want to say a few things about predatory publishers?
The microphone.
Yeah.
Play around a little bit with predatory journals when I was a librarian. I produced fake papers and sent them in and saw that they were accepted, and they were just fake. I wrote a mathematical paper full of mathematical buzzwords, and it was immediately accepted, and they wanted me to pay. So they exist, and even a professor in the university where I worked, a professor of mathematics, he almost sent in one of his papers into one of these journals. So even experienced scientists can sometimes fall into this trap.
Now, so no journal, even if it's an open access journal, no journal should be asking you for money until your paper is accepted. No journal should be charging you a submission fee. No journal should be charging you a peer review fee. They should only be asking for money for the publication costs once the paper has been accepted. So that's the other thing to keep in mind as an author. If you get a request for money any time before acceptance, after peer review, walk away, because it's almost certainly going to be a predatory journal.
And often when you have an article accepted by a predatory journal, and then you find out and you want to take it out, then they charge you the APC again to take it out. So they win in all situations.
Only once.
Yes. But there are thousands of scientists falling into the trap.
There is a nice question from Paula Valero. Valero, yes, and she is asking about whether you know about the proportion of accepted papers when you compare the double-blind option compared to the single-blind option.
Yes, there are statistics on this. Again, I've seen data that Nature, Springer Nature has released and Elsevier has released. And actually, this is another very interesting point to make. Actually, your chances of acceptance, if you go for double blind as opposed to single blind, are not significantly affected. So what it does is remove peer review bias from the process, but doesn't make a difference to your chances of eventual acceptance. And that's because peer reviewers, if they don't know the author's identities, tend to be fairer and more like impartial with their review. So I would say, if you get the choice, submit double blind, because you've got nothing to lose and everything to gain from that process. So I think it's a very good, very fair development in academic publishing, to be honest. So, and more journals should be offering that option to authors.
And also continue with this idea presented by Valero, Paula. What do you think about the double blind option and the acceptance of papers authored by women compared with men?
Again, I may have missed something on this, and there may be studies that have been performed on this, but I'm not aware of a study that's been conducted yet to look at that in particular. But I would expect, unsurprisingly, I would expect that, because of all the inherent biases that we see in the peer review process, and because the chances are your paper will get reviewed by a white male native speaker when it goes to an international journal, unfortunately, then, again, if you've got the option of submitting double blind, I would recommend that you take it. And having said that, though, don't forget to anonymize all your documents, because we get lots of submissions that are double blind, but it's very obvious, because you can look in the track changes or the document history or the PDF history immediately. You can see Franz Lettenstrom from University of this and that has made the document, even though it's been submitted double blind. So just keep that in mind when you make those submissions. Important point as well.
Giovanni Guevara asks, what do you mean? What do you mean about increasing rate of? I think it's what do you think about increasing rate of paper retractions from Science, Nature, and other journals?
Yeah, so we've seen this in the last year in particular, in part related to rapid publication of papers that have something to do with COVID. In particular, but also this general kind of pressure on authors to get their papers out and published as fast as possible. So there's been lots more cases of fraud, lots more cases of data falsification, manipulation, and an issue that people are talking about more and more at the moment in particular is this phenomenon of paper mills. You may have heard of these kind of services that you can basically pay somebody to write your paper for you. You can pay somebody to put your name as an author on a paper. This kind of fraud in academic publishing is also on the rise. So there's been a few well-documented cases recently. Royal Society of Chemistry, big article in Nature this week where they've looked at this issue, where they've identified lots of examples of papers that are just fraudulent, they're translated from other languages, or they've recycled figures from other papers, where authors have paid for a service to get a paper written and submitted. So, I mean, all these things are, you know, there's people whose job it is in the publishing industry to keep their beady eye on these kinds of activities. So, you know, hopefully we'll see less and less of it in the future. Franz?
And there are also fake authors that are put in as a joke.
I saw that, yeah.
And some of them are some of the world top scientists, and they don't exist because they are put there by famous scientists, and they appear in famous articles, but they don't exist. It's such a joke.
I forget the name exactly, but I saw one in Nature like last week, like a French lady's name that's been inserted into lots of articles as a protest, you know, and she's this particular name is now gathering citations and has quite a big H index because all of the papers that this name's been inserted onto.
Exactly.
There we go. We'll have to follow up with some examples. Should I just point out again to our audience today that if you look on eurekaselect.com, you can see the whole range of Bentham Science and Bentham Open journals. So eurekaselect.com, and our webcams obscure the top of this slide, but Bentham's offering a number of discounts to attendees this afternoon, including submission discounts, open access article processing charge discounts, and what I think is really cool down at the bottom, if you submit to Current Vascular Pharmacology as an attendee from this presentation this afternoon, you'll actually get faster publication in that journal. So I don't know, in conclusion, if you guys want to say anything more about this, maybe Franz?
I just want to make a comment. There is a service for those scientists who publish in open access called zenodo.com. I will send it out on the list. Yeah, there it is. Mm-hmm. Zenodo.com is a spin-off from the data saving that they do at CERN in Geneva, because they have open science for all their papers, and they save all data and link it to the papers, and therefore they have a fantastically enormous system. They can handle 2 terabytes of data every second. That's the output of science from CERN. And therefore, this system has a lot of holes, a lot of unused space. And therefore, as a spin-off, they have created this zenodo.com. Any scientist working on a university that doesn't have its own data-saving infrastructure can save his or her raw data in zenodo.com. And I think the limit for data sets is 20 gigabyte. And there is no total limit. You can put in as much as you want. And this is very good because then you get DOI links from your raw data, from your anything you used to create the results of your article, programs, etc. You can get it linked to your open access article. And this is, it's nice if you want to show your data behind your article.
Very nice. Good.
Okay, so shall we just, we'll say thank you very much then to everybody who tuned in for our presentation this afternoon, and thanks to Luis and Franz for setting this up, and we'll be in touch, and everybody that listened and registered to this will get an email in the next 24 hours with a link to the recording of this presentation. If you want the slides, you can of course get in touch with Franz and I as well. So thank you everybody for listening, and
thank you very much. Thank you. Very nice. Bye-bye.